The moment Eliza Thornfield saw the black carriage rolling toward her dying estate, she knew her father had finally sold her. Not with words, not yet. But she could see it in the way he couldn't meet her eyes that morning, in the frantic whispers behind closed doors, in the way her mother's hands trembled as she set out the last decent china they owned. They were drowning. And she was the anchor they were ready to cut loose. But Eliza Thornfield had never been good at doing what she was told. Stay with us to see how one woman's refusal to be broken rewrote the rules of power itself. Like this video, comment where you're watching from, and let's begin. The Thornfield estate had once been magnificent. Eliza could still remember it that way, when she was small enough to believe that marble columns would stand forever, that gardens could bloom eternally, that her family's name meant something more than fading ink on unpaid debts. Now, at 23, she stood at her bedroom window and watched their world crumble in slow motion. The East Wing had been closed for 2 years. The servants had dwindled from 20 to 3. The horses had been sold last autumn, except for one aging mare, too broken to fetch a price. Even the portraits in the Great Hall had vanished one by one, smuggled away in the night to pay creditors who came knocking with increasing frequency. Her father hadn't left his study in days. Eliza pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the road that cut through their overgrown grounds. The morning mist clung to the neglected hedges like a burial shroud. She'd known this day would come, had felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and merciless. The sound of wheels on gravel made her spine go rigid. "No," she whispered, then louder, "No." But the black carriage kept coming, drawn by 4 magnificent horses that put their own deceased stable to shame. It was the kind of vehicle that announced wealth so profound it didn't need to shout. It simply existed, undeniable and absolute. Behind her, the bedroom door flew open. "Eliza!" Her mother, Margaret Thornfield, stood in the doorway, her face pale but composed in that terrifying way she had when everything was falling apart. "You need to dress, now." "Who is it?" "The Duke of Ashford, Adrian Blackmore." Margaret's voice cracked on the name. "He's come to... Your father sent word weeks ago. We didn't think... But he's agreed to meet you." Eliza turned slowly from the window. "Meet me. As if I'm a horse he's considering purchasing." "Eliza, please. Did father at least negotiate a good price?" "That's enough." Margaret's composure shattered. She crossed the room in 3 strides and gripped Eliza's shoulders. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think any of us wanted this? But we are ruined, Eliza, completely and utterly ruined. The creditors will take this house within the month. Your father will go to debtor's prison, and you..." Her voice broke. "You will have nothing, no home, no name, no future. So sell me to a stranger instead." Margaret's hand connected with Eliza's cheek before either of them realized it was coming. The silence that followed was deafening. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered, her hand trembling. "I'm so sorry. But you don't understand. The Duke of Ashford doesn't need our money. He doesn't need our connections. He's one of the most powerful men in England. If he's offering, then why?" Eliza touched her burning cheek. "Why would a man like that want a woman from a dying family? What's broken in him that he can't find someone suitable among his own kind?" Margaret had no answer, or perhaps she simply didn't want to speak it aloud. The knock on the front door echoed through the hollow house like a death knell. "The blue dress," Margaret said quietly. "I had Mary press it this morning. It's the only one without visible mending." She left before Eliza could respond. Alone in her room, Eliza stared at the blue dress hanging on the wardrobe door. It was beautiful once, silk imported from France, embroidered with silver thread and patterns that caught the light. Now it just looked tired, desperate, like everything else in this house. Like her. She could hear voices downstairs. Male voices. Her father's nervous laughter, too loud and too frequent. The deep, measured tones of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. The Duke of Ashford. Eliza's hands clenched into fists. She knew how this worked. She'd watched it happen to other women, other families circling the drain of social annihilation. The desperate fathers who paraded their daughters like livestock. The wealthy men who came to inspect and appraise. The girls who smiled and curtsied and spoke in careful, pleasant tones about nothing at all, auditioning for a role they'd play for the rest of their lives. The door, the cage, the end of everything they might have been. No, Eliza said again, but this time it wasn't a protest. It was a decision. She moved quickly, before she could second-guess herself, past the blue dress, to the back of her wardrobe where she kept the clothes she wasn't supposed to have anymore. The simple cotton dresses she'd worn as a girl before someone decided her value was tied to silk and pearls. She pulled out the plainest one she could find. Brown, worn, utterly unremarkable. A maid's dress. Her mother would be horrified. Her father would be apoplectic. But Eliza was done being the obedient daughter, the decorative solution to their problems. If she was going to be sold, she'd at least look her buyer in the eye first, see what kind of man thought he could purchase a human being. She dressed quickly, braiding her dark hair into a simple plait and covering it with a cap. No jewelry, no powder, nothing that marked her as anything other than one of the invisible servants that kept houses like this running. When she looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Perfect. She slipped out of her room and down the servants' stairs, the route she'd explored as a child, the hidden arteries of the house where the real work happened, where people told the truth because they thought no one important was listening. The voices grew clearer as she approached the drawing room. "Most generous offer, Your Grace," her father's voice, oleaginous with desperation. "Eliza is a remarkable young woman, well-educated, accomplished in all the necessary graces." "I'm not interested in graces, Lord Thornfield." The Duke's voice stopped Eliza cold. It was nothing like she'd expected. No pompous aristocratic drawl, no bored condescension. It was quiet, controlled, and somehow more dangerous for its restraint. Of course," her father fumbled. "What I meant to say, you meant to say that you're selling your daughter to save yourself from ruin." The silence that followed was brutal. Your Grace, I assure you." "Don't." The single word cut like a blade. "I didn't come here for assurances or pleasantries. I came to meet her. Where is she?" "She's dressing. She'll be down shortly. In the meantime, perhaps we could discuss the terms." "There are no terms to discuss until I speak with her directly." Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs. She edged closer to the door, peering through the gap where it stood slightly ajar. Her father paced near the fireplace, his coat hanging loose on his diminished frame. He'd lost weight, she realized, lost everything really, except the desperate hope that this stranger would save them. And the stranger, Adrian Blackmore, Duke of Ashford, stood with his back to her, but even in silhouette, he commanded the room. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black that made him look like a living shadow. His posture was perfectly controlled, as if he'd been trained since birth to occupy space with absolute authority. "She's very beautiful," her mother offered weakly from her corner chair. "Is she?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. "Well, yes, of course. Everyone says—" "I didn't ask what everyone says." The Duke turned, and Eliza caught her first glimpse of his face. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 30, with sharp features that might have been handsome if they weren't so severe. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a mouth set in a line that suggested he smiled approximately never. But it was his eyes that trapped her. Even from across the room, even through the gap in the door, she could feel the weight of them. Intelligent, calculating, missing nothing. "I asked if you think she's beautiful, Lady Thornfield. Not society. Not the gossips. You." Her mother. Margaret's composure cracked. "I think she's extraordinary, but she's also difficult. She reads too much, questions too much. She's never been content with the role expected of her, and I fear that she'll be difficult for me to control." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The Duke moved toward the window, his attention shifting to the ruined gardens beyond. "Let me be clear about something, Lady Thornfield. I'm not looking for an ornament. I'm not looking for someone to manage my household and produce heirs and stay quiet at dinner parties. If that's what you're offering, I'll leave now and save us all the trouble." "Then what are you looking for?" The question burst from Eliza's father. "Because I'll be frank, Your Grace, we are desperate. We need your help. But I don't understand why a man of your position would consider a match with a family like ours. So tell me what you want, and I'll do everything in my power to provide it." The Duke was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, dangerous in a different way. "I want someone who won't break." Before anyone could respond to that cryptic statement, Eliza made her decision. She pushed open the door and walked in, not as a daughter, not as a prospect, not as a woman being paraded for inspection, as a maid. "Pardon the intrusion," she said, keeping her eyes down in perfect servant deference. "Would anyone care for tea?" The room erupted. "What?" Her father's face went purple. "What is the meaning of this? Where is Eliza? Why are you—" But the Duke of Ashford was staring at her with those dark, penetrating eyes, and Eliza knew with absolute certainty that her disguise had fooled exactly no one. A smile ghosted across his severe features, small, brief, utterly devastating. "Hello, Miss Thornfield," he said quietly. Her mother gasped. Her father made a sound like a wounded animal. Eliza lifted her chin and met the Duke's gaze directly. "Your Grace. That's quite an entrance. I prefer to make my own introductions." "Eliza!" Her father lurched forward. "Apologize at once. His Grace has traveled all this way, and this display is—" "Fascinating," the Duke interrupted. He moved closer, studying her with the intensity of a scholar examining a rare specimen. "Tell me, Miss Thornfield, why the disguise?" "I wanted to see what kind of man comes shopping for a wife at a bankrupt estate." Her mother made a sound of pure horror, but the Duke's smile widened fractionally. "And what did you conclude?" "That you're either desperate or damaged." "Eliza, that is enough." Her father's voice cracked. "Your Grace, I apologize profusely. She's overwrought. She doesn't know what she's saying. She knows exactly what she's saying." The Duke held up a hand, silencing him without a glance. His eyes never left Eliza's face. "And she's not wrong. So which is it, Miss Thornfield? Am I desperate or damaged?" The room held its breath. Eliza studied him properly now, without the barrier of the door. Up close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands remained perfectly still at his sides. Not relaxed, but controlled. Deliberately controlled. "Both," she said finally, "just like the rest of us." Something shifted in his expression, not softness exactly, but recognition. "Your Grace," her father tried again, his voice pleading. "If you would allow me to explain, leave us." The command was quiet, but absolute. "I beg your pardon?" "You heard me, Lord Thornfield. Take your wife and leave the room. I'd like to speak with your daughter alone." "Absolutely not. The impropriety of leaving two adults to have a conversation, or the impropriety of trying to sell your daughter without giving her a voice in the matter." The Duke's tone remained pleasant, but something sharp glinted beneath it. "Choose carefully." Eliza watched her father war with himself. Propriety versus survival, pride versus desperation. Survival won. It always did. "We'll be just outside," he said stiffly. "Should you need anything?" "We'll be fine," the Duke replied, and it sounded like a dismissal. Her parents fled the room like guilty children. The door closed behind them with a soft click that felt impossibly loud. Eliza and the Duke of Ashford stood alone in the drawing room, separated by 10 feet of worn carpet and an unbridgeable gulf of power, wealth, and circumstance. "You can drop the act now," he said. "What act?" "The maid costume. The defiance. Whatever point you were trying to make, you've made it." Eliza pulled off the servant's cap, shaking out her braid. "The point, Your Grace, was to see you without you performing for my benefit. To see who you actually are when you think no one important is watching." "And?" "You were kind to my mother until she offered to lie for you, then you cut her off." He tilted his head slightly. "You were listening at the door." "Of course I was listening at the door. Would you have walked into this trap blind?" To her surprise, he laughed. It was a rusty sound, as if he didn't use it often. "Trap," he repeated. "Interesting choice of words. What would you call it?" "A negotiation." "I'm not a contract to be negotiated." "No," he agreed. "You're a woman in an impossible situation trying to maintain control over the one thing no one can take from you." "And what's that?" Your choices. The word hung between them like a challenge. Eliza moved to the window, needing distance from his unsettling perception. Outside, the morning mist was burning off, revealing the full extent of their estate's decay. Untrimmed hedges, crumbling fountain, gardens gone to seed. "You still haven't told me why you're here," she said to the glass. "A duke doesn't need to marry into a ruined family, so what do you want?" She heard him move behind her, not close enough to threaten, but close enough that she could feel his presence like a shift in atmospheric pressure. "You said I was damaged," he said quietly. "You were right." Eliza turned to face him. Up close, she could see the scars. Not physical. Those would have been easier. These were the invisible kind. The ones that lived in the careful control of his expression, the way he held himself like a man expecting attack from any direction. "What happened to you?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "The same thing that happens to everyone in our world, Miss Thornfield. I learned that power and position don't protect you from the things that matter. They just give you better walls to hide behind." "Then why seek more walls? Why marriage? Why now?" He was silent for a long moment, and Eliza thought he might not answer. Then, "Because I'm tired of hiding, and I think you might be too." The honesty of it stole her breath. "You don't know me," she managed. "No, but I know what I saw when you walked through that door dressed as a maid. I saw someone who would rather risk her family's last hope than play the expected role. Someone who values truth over safety. Someone who understands that sometimes the only way to survive is to refuse the game entirely. That's reckless. Yes. It's dangerous. Also, yes. It's..." She broke off, frustrated. "Why aren't you angry? I just sabotaged my father's entire plan. Your entire plan. Why are you smiling?" "Because," Adrian Blackmore said, and this time the smile reached his eyes. "For the first time in 10 years, I'm having an honest conversation. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" Eliza stared at him, trying to reconcile this man with the cold, severe figure who'd entered the room. "This is insane," she said finally. "Completely. I don't even like you. We've known each other for 15 minutes. That would be concerning if you did." Despite everything, the absurdity, the desperation, the sheer impossibility of the situation, Eliza felt a laugh bubbling up in her chest. "You're very strange," she told him. "Says the woman who wore a disguise to meet her potential husband." "Potential," she emphasized. "I haven't agreed to anything." "I know, that's why I'm here." He moved to the fireplace, studying the bare mantel where family portraits used to sit. "I'm not going to lie to you, Miss Thornfield. I have my reasons for considering this marriage, and they're not romantic, but I will give you something no other man in my position would." "What's that?" "A choice. A real one." Eliza crossed her arms. "Explain." "Your father sent me a letter 6 weeks ago, outlined your family's situation, suggested a mutually beneficial arrangement. I had my people investigate. You're smart, educated far beyond what's typical for women of your class. You speak 3 languages, you've read more than most university scholars, and according to everyone I asked, you're a challenge." He said the word with something like appreciation. "Your own mother warned me that you'd never be satisfied with a traditional marriage." "She's right." "I know, that's why I came." Eliza felt her heart hammering again. "I don't understand." Adrian turned from the fireplace to face her fully. "I don't want a traditional marriage either, Miss Thornfield. I want a partnership, an equal one, someone who can think, who can challenge me, who won't simply agree with everything I say because of my title." "Why?" "Because I'm about to do something that will make me very unpopular with very powerful people. And I need someone beside me who won't break when the pressure comes. Someone who knows what it's like to stand alone and choose truth anyway." The room felt smaller suddenly, more intimate, more dangerous. "What are you planning to do?" Eliza asked. "I'm planning to tell the truth. About my past. About my family. About things that powerful people would prefer stay buried." His voice was steady, but she could hear the steel beneath it. "It's going to cause a scandal. Possibly destroy me. Probably destroy anyone associated with me." "Then why do it? Because living a lie is worse than dying for the truth." The conviction in his voice made something crack in Eliza's chest. She knew that feeling. had known it every time she chose honesty over comfort, every time she refused to be quiet and pleasant and acceptable. "And you think I would choose to stand in that fire with you?" she asked. "Risk whatever future I might have for your truth?" "No," Adrian said simply. "I think you'd stand in the fire anyway. I'm just offering you the choice of whose fire to face." Eliza moved to the ancient sofa and sat down before her legs could give out. This conversation had veered so far from what she'd expected that she couldn't find her bearings. "This is madness," she said for the third time. Adrian sat across from her, maintaining that careful distance. "Yes, but it's honest madness, which is more than most people get. You're asking me to choose between two forms of destruction. Either marry you and face scandal, or stay here and watch my family lose everything." "No," his voice was firm. "I'm telling you that destruction is coming either way. The only question is whether you face it as yourself or as whatever role someone else wrote for you." The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Eliza looked around the drawing room, the faded wallpaper, the empty spaces where valuable things used to be. The portrait of her grandfather that they'd somehow managed to keep. This house, this life, this version of herself that everyone expected her to be, it was already gone. Had been gone for years. She'd just been too stubborn to admit it. "I need time," she said, "to think." "Of course. And I need to know the truth. All of it. What secret you're planning to reveal. What scandal I'd be walking into." Adrian hesitated. For the first time since he'd entered the room, she saw uncertainty cross his face. "If I tell you," he said slowly, "there's no going back. You'll carry that knowledge whether you choose to marry me or not." "Good," Eliza said. "I'm tired of making decisions in the dark." He studied her for a long moment, and she had the sense of being weighed, measured, tested in some fundamental way. Then he nodded. "All right," Adrian Blackmore said, "but not here, and not now. If we're going to have this conversation, we're going to have it properly, away from your family's expectations and my reputation." "Where?" "There's a path through your gardens. It leads to an old gazebo by the lake. Meet me there in an hour." Eliza's breath caught. "That's... People would talk if they saw us." "People are going to talk anyway," he interrupted. "The question is whether you care enough about their gossip to let it make your decisions for you." He stood, straightening his coat with practiced efficiency. The severe Duke had returned, all traces of that strange vulnerability locked away. "1 hour, Miss Thornfield. If you come, I'll tell you everything. If you don't—" He paused at the door. "Then I'll leave and you'll never see me again. The choice is yours." Then he was gone, pulling the door closed behind him. Eliza sat alone in the drawing room, her heart racing, her mind spinning with impossible choices. Outside, she could hear the murmur of voices as the Duke took his leave. Her father's anxious questions, her mother's worried silence, the sound of the carriage wheels on gravel as it pulled away from the house. But not leaving, just repositioning to wait. Eliza looked down at her hands, still wearing the maid's simple dress, still playing a role even now. The only question is whether you face it as yourself or as whatever role someone else wrote for you. She stood abruptly, decision crystallizing in her chest like ice. An hour. She had an hour to choose between safety and truth, between the cage she knew and the fire she didn't. She made it to the door in 3 strides, then stopped. On the side table, someone had left the Morning Post. Bills, mostly. Demands. Threats. But on top of the pile, a single letter with an unfamiliar seal. Her hands trembled as she broke it open. "Lord Thornfield, this is your final notice. Payment in full is required within 30 days, or foreclosure proceedings will begin. We regret to inform you that no extension will be granted. Yours in business, Whitmore and Associates, 30 days." They had 30 days before they lost everything. Eliza set down the letter carefully, precisely, as if it might explode. Then she walked out of the drawing room, up the stairs, and into her bedroom where the blue silk dress still hung waiting. She looked at it for a long moment, that symbol of who she was supposed to be, who society expected her to become. Then she changed back into her own clothes. Not the maid's disguise, but not the silk either. A simple day dress, practical and plain, the kind of thing she wore when she was just herself, alone in her room with her books and her thoughts. Her mother intercepted her in the hallway. Eliza, what happened? What did he say? Did he... Margaret's eyes were wild with desperate hope. He's coming back, isn't he? Tell me he's coming back. I don't know, Mother. What do you mean you don't know? You were alone with him for nearly half an hour. Surely he must have said, "He gave me a choice," Eliza interrupted quietly, "and I'm trying to figure out what to do with it." A choice? What choice? Eliza, we don't have time for choices. The creditors... I know about the creditors. I saw the letter. Margaret's face crumpled. Then you understand. We have 30 days. Maybe less. If the Duke doesn't... If you don't... She couldn't finish the sentence. Eliza took her mother's hands, feeling how thin they'd become, how fragile everything had become. I'm going to meet him, she said. In an hour. He's asked me to walk with him. Alone? Yes. Eliza, the impropriety is the least of our problems. She squeezed her mother's hands gently. Trust me. Please. Margaret searched her daughter's face, and whatever she saw there made her shoulders sag in defeat. An hour, she whispered. Don't be longer than an hour. And for heaven's sake, Eliza, don't ruin this. Whatever he's offering, whatever he wants, just don't ruin it. Eliza didn't answer, couldn't answer, because she was beginning to suspect that Adrian Blackmore, Duke of Ashford, wasn't offering salvation. He was offering revolution, and she had 58 minutes to decide if she was brave enough to burn the world down beside him. She found him at the gazebo exactly 1 hour later. He'd shed his formal coat, standing in shirt sleeves with his back to the path, staring out at the lake that had once been the pride of the Thornfield estate. Now it was choked with algae, the swans long since sold, the boat rotting at the dock. You came, he said without turning. You're surprised? Honestly? Yes. He glanced over his shoulder, and in the afternoon light she could see more of him, the exhaustion, the wariness, the weight of whatever truth he was carrying. Most people choose comfort over uncertainty, even temporary comfort. Eliza joined him at the railing, maintaining a careful distance. I stopped believing in comfort a long time ago. When? The question was gentle, but it carved straight through her defenses. When I was 17, she heard herself say. My father took me to London for the season. There was a man, Lord Ashworth. He was twice my age, cruel, and everyone knew it. But he was rich, and my father needed his money. She kept her eyes on the water. I was expected to encourage him, to smile and flirt, and pretend I didn't see how he looked at me. Like property, like something he was entitled to possess. What did you do? I told him the truth, in front of everyone. Told him exactly what I thought of men who collected women like hunting trophies. She smiled bitterly. The scandal ruined us socially. We limped along for a while after that, but I'd committed the unforgivable sin. Being honest without power to protect me. Adrian turned to face her fully. And now? Now I have even less power, but I also have less to lose. She met his gaze. So tell me your truth, Your Grace. Tell me what secret is worth destroying yourself over. He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, my title is a lie, he said quietly. The words hung in the air between them like smoke from a gunshot. Eliza's mind struggled to process what she'd just heard. Your title is a lie, she repeated slowly. What does that mean? Adrian's jaw tightened. It means the Duke of Ashford shouldn't exist. It means my entire life is built on a foundation that should have crumbled 20 years ago. I don't understand. My father was the Duke of Ashford, legitimate, titled, powerful, but my mother... He stopped, the muscle in his cheek twitching. My mother wasn't his wife. The implications crashed over Eliza like a wave. You're illegitimate. Yes. The word came out bitter. The bastard son of a duke and his mistress. I should have inherited nothing, been nothing. But my father had no other children, and he loved my mother in his own twisted way. So when he died, Adrian's hands gripped the gazebo railing so hard his knuckles went white. He falsified records, paid off priests, clerks, anyone who might question the legitimacy of my birth. created an entire fiction about a secret marriage that never happened. Eliza felt the world tilting beneath her feet. How many people know? 3. My father's former solicitor who helped orchestrate the whole thing, a priest my father trusted, now dead, and me. He turned to look at her, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. My father told me on his deathbed, made me swear to protect the secret, said everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed, would be destroyed if the truth came out. And you've kept it hidden for how long? 10 years. 10 years of living a lie. 10 years of carrying that weight alone. Why tell me? Eliza asked. Why now? You could have married anyone, kept your secret, lived out your life without... Because I'm done lying, Adrian interrupted, and there was steel in his voice now. I'm going to Parliament next month. I'm going to stand in front of everyone and tell them the truth. That I'm not the Duke of Ashford, that I never was. That the entire peerage system is so corrupt that a bastard can buy his way into one of the most powerful positions in England. Eliza's breath caught. They'll destroy you. Yes. They'll strip your title, your lands, everything. I know. Then why... She gripped his arm, forcing him to face her. Why would you do this? Because, Adrian said quietly, I watched my father die knowing he'd spent his entire life protecting a lie. I watched him choose reputation over truth, power over peace, and I swore I wouldn't become him. His hand covered hers where it rested on his arm. I'd rather lose everything as myself than keep everything as someone I'm not. The conviction in his voice resonated with something deep in Eliza's chest. She understood it, had felt it herself when she'd ruined her family's social standing, rather than pretend to want Lord Ashworth's advances. Your father didn't tell you to confess, she said. He told you to protect the secret. He did. So this is your choice. Your rebellion. Adrian smiled, but it was edged with pain. I suppose it is. Eliza pulled her hand back, her mind racing. And you want me to what? Stand beside you while you commit social suicide? Watch you lose everything you've ever known? I want you to have a choice, he corrected. If you marry me, yes, you'll be caught in the scandal. Your name will be dragged through every drawing room in England. People will say you're a fortune hunter who married a fraud. They'll say worse things than that. And if I don't marry you? Then you'll watch your family lose this estate in 30 days. You'll have no home, no prospects, no future. Your father will likely go to prison. Your mother... He didn't finish the sentence. So it's not really a choice at all, Eliza said bitterly. Isn't it? Adrian moved closer, his dark eyes searching hers. One path leads to certain destruction. The other leads to uncertain destruction. But at least on the uncertain path, you get to choose who you are when the world falls apart. That's not comfort. I never promised comfort. I promised honesty. A bird called somewhere across the lake, the sound lonely and sharp. Eliza turned away from him, staring out at the water that reflected the gray sky like tarnished silver. Tell me something, she said. Why me? If you're going to destroy yourself anyway, why not do it alone? Why drag someone else into your fire? Because I'm a coward. The raw admission startled her into turning back. Adrian's face was carefully blank, but she could see the truth in his eyes. I've been alone with this secret for 10 years. I've watched myself become harder, colder, more isolated with every passing day, and I realized that if I'm going to burn everything down, I don't want to do it alone. I don't want to become so consumed by my own righteousness that I forget what I'm fighting for. And what are you fighting for? The right to exist as I am, not as who my father needed me to be, not as who society expects, just myself. He exhaled slowly. I need someone who understands that. Someone who's already chosen truth over safety. Someone who won't break when the pressure comes. You barely know me, Eliza protested. How can you possibly know I won't break? Because you walked into that drawing room dressed as a maid rather than play the role your parents wrote for you. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. Because you're still standing here listening instead of running. Because everything about you screams that you'd rather die honest than live as a lie. He was right. Heaven help her, he was right. This is insane, Eliza whispered. Yes. We don't even know each other. We will, if you choose this path. And if I don't? If I walk away right now? Adrian's expression shuddered. Then I'll honor our agreement. I'll pay off your father's debts before I make my confession to Parliament. You'll have time to find another solution, another suitor. I won't leave you with nothing. The offer should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like a door closing on something she hadn't known she wanted. Why would you do that? She asked. If I refuse you, why help at all? Because you listened, he said simply. Because you looked at me and saw a person, not a title. Because in 1 hour, you've given me more honesty than I've had in 10 years. He smiled, sad and small. Consider it payment for that. Eliza's throat tightened. She looked around the gazebo, the rotting wood, the peeling paint, the view of the lake where she'd played as a child before everything fell apart. This place, this life, this version of herself that was dying by inches. And Adrian Blackmore was offering her a choice. Not salvation, he'd been clear about that, but a choice about how to fall and who to be when she hit the ground. I need to think, she said finally. Of course. Not just about the marriage, about all of it. About what you're planning to do and whether it's… She stopped, searching for words. Whether it's brave or just self-destructive. Adrian's laugh was hollow. Can't it be both? I suppose it can. She met his eyes. Give me until tomorrow. I'll have an answer for you then. Tomorrow, he agreed. I'll return at noon. He started to leave, then paused at the edge of the gazebo. Eliza, may I call you Eliza? You're asking permission now after telling me you're planning to destroy your life? Some proprieties still matter. Despite everything, she felt a smile tugging at her lips. Yes, you may call me Eliza. Eliza. He said her name carefully as if testing its weight. Whatever you decide, thank you for listening. Thank you for not running. Then he was gone, disappearing down the overgrown path toward the front of the estate where his carriage waited. Eliza stood alone in the gazebo, her heart pounding, her mind spinning with impossible choices. A lie for a title, a bastard playing duke, a man ready to burn his entire world down for the truth. And he wanted her to light the match with him. She made it back to the house just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Her mother ambushed her in the entrance hall, her face tight with barely controlled panic. Well? Margaret demanded. What did he say? Did he make an offer? Not exactly. What does that mean, not exactly? Eliza, we don't have time for riddles. He told me the truth, Eliza interrupted. About why he's really here. Why he needs this marriage. Margaret's eyes narrowed. And I need to think about it. Think about it? Eliza, the creditors… I know about the creditors, Mother. I know we have 30 days. I know everything is falling apart. Eliza kept her voice steady with effort. But I won't make this decision in panic. I need until tomorrow. Tomorrow might be too late. Then it's too late. Eliza moved toward the stairs. But I won't be rushed into a choice that will define the rest of my life. She made it to her room before her mother could respond, closing the door and leaning against it with her eyes shut. Adrian Blackmore's words echoed in her mind. I'd rather lose everything as myself than keep everything as someone I'm not. She understood that, had felt it in her bones when she'd confronted Lord Ashworth, when she'd put on the maid's disguise, when she'd chosen truth over the easy lie again and again. But this was different. This wasn't just her future on the line. It was her family's survival. Eliza moved to her desk, pulling out the journal she'd kept since she was 15. Pages and pages of thoughts she'd never spoken aloud, dreams she'd never shared, the private truth of who she was when no one was watching. She flipped to a blank page and wrote, Adrian Blackmore wants to tell Parliament he's illegitimate. He wants to destroy himself for the truth, and he wants me to stand beside him when he does it. Seeing it in writing made it more real, more terrifying. Why does he need me? He said he doesn't want to burn alone. But is that enough reason to drag someone else into the fire? She paused, pen hovering over the page. Or am I already in the fire? Just a different one? The thought struck like lightning. She was already facing destruction. Whether she married Adrian or not, whether he confessed or not, her family was ruined. The creditors would take the estate. Her father would face prison. She'd be left with nothing. No home, no prospects, no future. At least with Adrian, she'd have a choice about what kind of nothing she became. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Eliza?" Her father's voice, rough with drink and desperation. "May I come in?" She closed the journal quickly. "Yes." Charles Thornfield entered like a guilty penitent, his shoulders hunched, his eyes refusing to meet hers. "Your mother told me you need time to think," he said. "I wanted to. I thought we should talk." "About what, Father? About how you tried to sell me to save yourself?" He flinched as if she'd struck him. "It wasn't like that." "Wasn't it?" Eliza stood facing him across the small room. "You contacted the Duke without telling me. Arranged for him to come inspect me like livestock. What would you call it?" "I would call it trying to save my family from ruin." Charles's voice cracked. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I wanted to beg a stranger to take my daughter? I had no choice." "Everyone has choices, Father. You just didn't like yours." "And what would you have had me do?" He lurched forward, desperation making him bold. "Watch the creditors take everything? Go to prison? Leave your mother destitute?" "I would have had you tell me the truth." Eliza's voice rose to match his. "I would have had you treat me like a person instead of a commodity." "You're right." The fight went out of him suddenly. He sank onto her bed, looking older than she'd ever seen him. "You're absolutely right. I should have told you. Should have given you a choice. But I am terrified, Eliza. And terrified men make terrible decisions." The honesty of it deflated her anger. She sat beside him, the mattress dipping under their combined weight. "Tell me how bad it really is." Charles was silent for a long moment, then, "We owe more than the estate is worth. Even if they take everything, the house, the lands, the last of the furniture, it won't be enough. I'll still owe £30,000. Eliza's breath caught. £30,000, an impossible sum. "The Duke offered to pay it," her father continued quietly. "All of it. In exchange for your hand in marriage. It's more than generous, Eliza. It's salvation." "Is it?" She looked at her father's haggard face. "Or is it just trading one form of bondage for another?" "I don't understand." "The Duke told me something today. Something about himself. Something that changes everything." She chose her words carefully. "If I marry him, there will be a scandal, a huge one. It could destroy his reputation. Maybe ours too, what little we have left." Charles went very still. "What kind of scandal?" "I can't tell you. Not yet. But I need you to understand, if I agree to this, it won't be the simple solution you're hoping for. It might make things worse." "Worse than debtor's prison?" "Differently terrible," Eliza clarified. "And I need to know, if I make this choice, if I marry him and the scandal comes, will you stand by me? Or will you blame me for not being the perfect, obedient daughter who saved you quietly?" Her father's hands trembled in his lap. "Eliza, answer me, Father. Because I need to know if I'm going into this alone." Charles Thornfield looked at his daughter, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years, and whatever he saw in her face made something crack in his expression. "I've failed you," he whispered. "In every way a father can fail a daughter. I've prioritized my comfort over your happiness, my reputation over your autonomy, and now I'm asking you to save me from the consequences of my own weakness." "Yes," Eliza said simply. "You are." "I don't deserve it." "No, you don't." He flinched again, but she wasn't finished. "But I'm not doing this for you, Father. If I marry the Duke, if I walk into whatever storm he's creating, it will be for me. Because I choose it. Because I'd rather face an uncertain future on my own terms than a certain future on someone else's." She took his trembling hands in hers. "But I need to know that when the scandal breaks, when society turns on us, when everything falls apart, you won't make it worse by blaming me for the choice I made." Charles's eyes filled with tears. "I promise. Whatever happens, I promise I won't blame you. His voice broke. "I'll try to be the father you deserved all along. It wasn't enough, but it was something." Eliza squeezed his hands once, then released them. I need to be alone now. I need to think. Her father stood, moving toward the door with the careful steps of a much older man. At the threshold, he paused. Eliza, whatever you decide, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You're stronger than I ever was. Braver. Better. He didn't wait for a response, just slipped out and closed the door softly behind him. Eliza sat in the growing darkness of her room, her father's words echoing in her mind. Stronger, braver, better. Was she? Or was she just as terrified as everyone else, just better at hiding it? She pulled out her journal again, writing by the last rays of sunlight slanting through her window. What am I really afraid of? That Adrian's confession will destroy us? Or that I'll finally have the chance to be myself, and I'll discover I don't know who that is? The question sat heavy on the page. She'd spent so long defining herself in opposition. Not obedient, not quiet, not acceptable. But if she stripped away all the knots, what was left? A knock on the door startled her. Miss Eliza? Mary's voice, the last remaining housemaid. There's someone at the kitchen door for you. Says it's urgent. Eliza frowned. Who? Won't give a name. Won't give a just says you'll want to hear what they have to say. Every instinct screamed trap. But curiosity, that fatal flaw that had gotten her into trouble her entire life, won out. She followed Mary down the servants' stairs to the kitchen. A figure waited in the shadows by the door, face obscured by a hood. You wanted to see me? Eliza asked, keeping her distance. The figure pulled back the hood, revealing a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper features. Miss Thornfield, my name is Catherine Wells. I was your Duke's father's housekeeper for 20 years. Her voice was cultured, despite the servant's clothes. And I have information you need before you make your decision. Eliza's heart began to race. What kind of information? The truth about Adrian Blackmore. The real truth, not the pretty lies he's telling himself. Catherine moved closer, her eyes glinting in the lamplight. He told you he's going to confess, didn't he? That he's going to Parliament to reveal his illegitimacy? How did you? Because that's exactly what his father said he'd do 20 years ago, right before he changed his mind and buried the truth instead. Catherine's smile was bitter. Adrian thinks he's being brave, noble, but he's walking into the same trap that consumed his father. I don't understand. The men who helped his father falsify those records, they're not dead, Miss Thornfield. They're very much alive and very powerful, and they have no intention of letting Adrian expose what they did. Catherine pulled a folded letter from her pocket. This arrived at my home 3 days ago. A warning. They know what Adrian's planning, and they're going to stop him. Eliza took the letter with trembling hands. The wax seal was broken, but she could still make out the crest, a lion and a sword. That's Lord Pemberton's seal, Catherine said. He was one of your Duke's father's closest allies. He's also the man who bribed the priests and clerks to legitimize Adrian's birth. If Adrian confesses, Pemberton goes down too. Do you really think a man like that will let it happen quietly? Eliza scanned the letter. The words were carefully neutral, but the threat was clear. Your former employer's son seems intent on revisiting old, settled matters. It would be unfortunate if certain truths about his mother's past came to light in the process. I trust you remember how to keep appropriate confidences. They're going to destroy him, Eliza whispered. Worse than that. Catherine leaned in close. They're going to destroy everyone he loves first. His mother's memory. Anyone who stands beside him. Anyone foolish enough to marry him. The warning hung in the air like smoke. Why are you telling me this? Eliza asked. Because I watched Adrian grow up. Watched him become the man his father should have been. And I'll be damned if I watch him throw it all away for a gesture that will change nothing. Catherine's voice softened fractionally. He needs someone to stop him, Miss Thornfield. Someone he'll actually listen to. And from what I hear, you're the only person who's ever told him an honest truth. So you want me to, what? Refuse him? Convince him to keep lying? I want you to save him from himself. Eliza's hands clenched around the letter. And if I don't? If I let him make his own choices? Then you'll both burn, and it will be for nothing. Catherine pulled her hood back up. Think carefully, Miss Thornfield. The choice you make tomorrow won't just affect you. It will affect everyone in Adrian's path, including the innocent people who helped his father and will be destroyed when the truth comes out. She disappeared into the night before Eliza could respond. Eliza stood frozen in the kitchen, the letter still clutched in her hands, her mind reeling. Adrian was walking into a trap. One set by men with power and resources and no qualms about destroying anyone in their way. And he was asking her to walk into it beside him. She should run, should refuse him tomorrow, take his money, find another solution. Save herself from the fire he was so determined to build. But even as she thought it, she knew she wouldn't, because Catherine Wells had made one critical mistake in her calculations. She'd assumed Eliza wanted to save Adrian from himself, when what Eliza actually wanted, what she'd wanted her entire life, was to watch the whole corrupt system burn. She made it back to her room in a daze, the letter still gripped tight enough to crumple the edges. She lit every candle she had, needing the light to push back the darkness of what she'd just learned. Adrian wasn't just planning to confess. He was planning to go to war with some of the most powerful men in England, men who had everything to lose and no scruples about how they protected their secrets. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something else entirely, something dangerous and fierce and utterly reckless. She felt alive. Eliza spread the letter on her desk, studying it in the candlelight. Lord Pemberton. She knew that name. Everyone did. He was one of the king's closest advisors, a man who'd survived 3 monarchs through careful politics and convenient alliances. And Adrian was going to expose him as a fraud and a conspirator. It was suicide. Beautiful, noble, absolutely suicidal. And for the first time in her life, Eliza understood what it meant to want something more than safety. She wanted to matter, wanted to stand for something bigger than her own survival, wanted to look in the mirror and see someone who'd chosen courage over comfort, even if it killed her. Especially if it killed her. Because at least then she'd die as herself. The decision crystallized in her chest like ice, sharp and cold and utterly certain. She pulled out fresh paper and began to write. Adrian, I've made my choice. Meet me at the gazebo at dawn. I have something to show you, and then we need to talk about what we're really walking into. Come alone. E. She sealed the letter and slipped down to the kitchen where Mary was still cleaning up from dinner. I need you to deliver this, Eliza said. To the inn where the Duke is staying, tonight. Mary's eyes widened. Miss, it's past 9. I know, but it's urgent. She pressed a coin into Mary's palm, one of the few she had left. Please. Mary looked at the letter, then at Eliza's face, and whatever she saw there made her nod. I'll go now. Thank you. Eliza watched from the kitchen window as Mary disappeared down the dark road toward town. Then she went back upstairs, pulled out her warmest cloak, and began to plan. If she was going to marry Adrian Blackmore, if she was going to stand beside him while he declared war on the aristocracy, she needed to know exactly what weapons their enemies had. And she needed to make sure Adrian understood what he was really asking her to do. Not just marry him, not just weather a scandal, but become a target. The hours crawled by. Eliza didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep with her mind spinning through possibilities and consequences. She watched the darkness outside her window slowly give way to the gray light of pre-dawn, watched the world wake up to a day that would change everything. At 5:30, she wrapped herself in her cloak and slipped out of the house. The walk to the gazebo felt different in the early morning. Mist clung to the ground, turning the overgrown gardens into something from a ghost story. Somewhere in the distance, a fox called, lonely and sharp. Adrian was already there. He stood at the railing where she'd left him yesterday, staring out at the lake. He'd clearly come straight from the inn. His coat was slightly rumpled, his hair not quite tamed, his jaw shadowed with stubble. He looked human, vulnerable, real. You came early, Eliza said. He turned, and the intensity in his eyes nearly stopped her breath. Your note said it was urgent. It is. She pulled Catherine's letter from her cloak and handed it to him. You need to read this. She watched his face as he read, watched understanding dawn, and then harden into something cold and furious. Where did you get this? His voice was deadly quiet. Your father's former housekeeper. Catherine Wells, she came to warn me last night. Eliza kept her voice steady. She said the men who helped your father are still alive, still powerful, and they know what you're planning. Catherine always was perceptive. Adrian, they're going to stop you. Whatever it takes, I know. The casual acknowledgement stunned her. You know, you knew they'd come after you and you were still going to… Yes. He met her eyes. Did you think I was naive enough to believe they'd let me confess peacefully? I've been preparing for this for months, Eliza, gathering evidence, building alliances, creating safeguards. Against men like Lord Pemberton? Men who have the king's ear. Against anyone who thinks power gives them the right to bury the truth. His conviction was absolute, terrifying, exactly what she'd hoped to find. Catherine said I should stop you, Eliza said quietly. Save you from yourself, convince you to keep your secret and live the lie your father built. And? Adrian moved closer, his dark eyes searching hers. What did you decide? Eliza took a breath, feeling the weight of the choice settle over her like armor. I decided that Catherine Wells doesn't understand what it means to choose truth over survival. But I do. She pulled off her cloak, standing before him in just her simple dress, exposed to the morning chill. I spent my whole life being told to be quiet, to be acceptable, to play the role society wrote for me. And I tried, Adrian. I really tried. But every time I bent myself into that shape, something inside me died a little more. Eliza, let me finish. Her voice shook but held. If I marry you, if I stand beside you when you make your confession, I'll be choosing to burn. I understand that. I understand that Pemberton and his allies will come after me too, that they'll dig up every scandal, every misstep, every reason to discredit me, that I'll lose whatever shreds of reputation I have left. Then why? Because I'd rather burn fighting than suffocate playing safe. The words came out fierce, final. Because you're right. Living a lie is worse than dying for the truth. And because for the first time in my life, someone is offering me a choice that isn't about survival. It's about who I want to be. Adrian stared at her, something raw and desperate in his expression. You're saying yes. I'm saying yes. Eliza closed the distance between them, standing close enough to feel the heat of him in the cold morning air. But not for the reasons you think. Not to save my family or secure a future. I'm saying yes because I want to watch the system that tried to break both of us burn to the ground, and I want to light the match. For a long moment, Adrian didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. Then he smiled, a real smile, fierce and bright and utterly transformative. You're extraordinary, he said. I'm reckless. That too. And then he was kissing her. It wasn't gentle, wasn't the careful, proper kiss of a courtship. It was desperate and claiming and absolutely certain, a promise sealed in fire instead of words. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Eliza felt something in her chest crack wide open. Tomorrow, Adrian said, his forehead resting against hers. We'll announce our engagement tomorrow, and then we start planning how to survive what comes after. Together, Eliza corrected. Together. The sun broke over the horizon, burning away the mist, turning the lake to gold. And Eliza Thornfield stood in the ruins of her family's estate, kissed by a man society would call a fraud, and felt more herself than she ever had before. Let them come. Let Pemberton and his allies bring their threats and their power and their desperate need to protect their lives. She'd spent her entire life being underestimated. Time to show them exactly how dangerous that mistake could be. The announcement appeared in the morning papers 2 days later. The Duke of Ashford is pleased to announce his engagement to Miss Eliza Thornfield, daughter of Lord and Lady Thornfield of Thornfield Estate. The wedding will take place in 3 weeks' time at the Duke's private chapel. 3 weeks. Not the 6 months tradition demanded, not even the 3 months decency suggested. 3 weeks before Adrian stood before Parliament and burned his life to the ground. And Eliza would be standing beside him when he did it. The scandal began immediately. Have you lost your mind? Lady Catherine Pembroke cornered Eliza at the modiste shop, where she'd gone to order a wedding dress she couldn't afford. Marrying the Duke of Ashford in 3 weeks? What will people think? That I'm fortunate, Eliza replied, keeping her voice level, even as the other women in the shop turned to stare. Fortunate. Lady Pembroke's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. My dear, everyone knows your family is ruined. This looks exactly like what it is, a desperate woman selling herself to the highest bidder. The words should have stung. A month ago, they would have. But Eliza had chosen her path, and she wouldn't let society's judgment shake her from it. Then everyone will be very interested to see what happens next, she said coolly. If you'll excuse me, Lady Pembroke, I have a fitting to attend. She swept past the older woman with her head high, even as whispers erupted in her wake. The modiste, a shrewd Frenchwoman named Madame Laurent, led her to a private room in the back. Once the door was closed, her professional smile faded. I must tell you, Miss Thornfield, there have been inquiries about your account. Eliza's stomach dropped. What kind of inquiries? Gentlemen asking how much you owe, whether your family has settled previous debts. Madame Laurent's expression was carefully neutral. I sent them away, of course, but I thought you should know. They were already digging, already looking for ammunition to use against her. Thank you for the warning, Eliza said quietly, and for your discretion. Your dress will be ready in 2 weeks, as promised. Madame Laurent hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, Miss Thornfield, I've dressed society women for 20 years. Most of them are gilded cages and silk. But you're something different. Don't let them break that. The unexpected kindness made Eliza's throat tight. I'll try not to. She left the shop through the back entrance, avoiding the curious stares of the women still gathered in the front. The carriage Adrian had sent for her waited in the alley. Another scandal, accepting his money before the wedding. But they were past caring about small scandals. They had bigger fires to light. The driver took her not to Thornfield Estate, but to Adrian's London townhouse. She'd been there twice since accepting his proposal, both times unchaperoned, both times the subject of vicious gossip. Let them talk. She had work to do. Adrian met her at the door himself, dismissing the butler with a gesture. He looked tired, she noticed, shadows under his eyes, tension in his jaw. How bad? She asked without preamble. 3 solicitors have withdrawn from representing me in the next month. 2 members of Parliament who'd promised to listen to my testimony have suddenly become unavailable. He led her to his study, where papers covered every surface. And someone leaked a rumor that I'm mentally unstable, preparing to make wild accusations to cover my own financial mismanagement. Are you financially mismanaging anything? Not even slightly. Adrian poured them both brandy, propriety be damned. Which means someone's building a narrative, discrediting me before I ever open my mouth. Eliza took the glass, studying the documents scattered across his desk. Names, dates, connections. The architecture of a conspiracy. Lord Pemberton, she said, pointing to a name that appeared repeatedly. And Lord Ashworth. Her hand froze. The same Lord Ashworth who propositioned you at 17. Yes. Adrian's smile was grim. Turns out he was one of the men who helped my father. He owes his current position to the favors my father bought with his lies. If I expose the truth, Ashworth loses everything. So he has every reason to destroy us first. Precisely. Eliza downed the brandy in one burning swallow. Lord Ashworth. The man who'd looked at her like property, who'd smiled while making it clear exactly what he expected in exchange for his attention. The man whose advances she'd publicly refused, ruining her family's social standing in the process. Now he was coming for her again, but this time with the full weight of his position behind him. What's our countermove? She asked. Adrian looked at her with something like wonder. Our countermove, not my battle, ours. We're in this together. That was the agreement. Most women would have run by now. I'm not most women. Eliza set down her glass. Now tell me the plan. He pulled out a leather portfolio, opening it to reveal a stack of documents. These are copies of the original falsified records. Marriage certificates, baptismal records, witness statements, all of it forged. I have 3 independent experts ready to testify about the forgeries. And the men who helped forge them? 2 are dead. 1 is senile. The rest? His expression hardened. The rest will have to be exposed along with my father's lie, including Pemberton and Ashworth. Eliza studied the documents, her mind racing. They'll say you're lying, that you manufactured these forgeries to attack them for political reasons. I know. So we need something more, something they can't deny. Like what? An idea was forming in Eliza's mind. Dangerous. Possibly insane. Exactly the kind of reckless gambit that could either save them or destroy them completely. What if we made them confess first? She said slowly. Adrian frowned. Confess? Eliza, these men have spent 20 years protecting this secret. They're not going to not suddenly, and not willingly. She met his eyes. But what if they thought they had to? What if they believed staying silent was more dangerous than confession? I don't follow. Eliza began to pace, the idea crystallizing as she moved. They're building a narrative about you being unstable, making wild accusations. What if we let them think it's working? What if we make them believe you're about to crack, about to say something even more damaging than the truth? Something like what? Something that implicates them in worse crimes. Something that would require them to acknowledge the original forgery just to defend themselves against the bigger lie. Adrian went very still. You want to blackmail them. I want to trap them. Eliza stopped pacing, meeting his gaze directly. These men think they're untouchable, that their power protects them from consequences. But power makes people arrogant, and arrogant people make mistakes when they panic. It's incredibly dangerous. Everything we're doing is dangerous. If it fails, if they realize what we're attempting, then we're no worse off than we already are. Eliza moved closer, her voice urgent. Adrian, we can't beat them by playing their game. We have to change the rules entirely. He studied her for a long moment, and she could see him weighing the risks, calculating the odds. Then he smiled, that fierce, transformative smile she was beginning to recognize as his real self breaking through the careful control. All right, he said. Tell me exactly what you're thinking. They worked through the night, building the trap piece by piece. The core of the plan was elegant in its simplicity. They would leak a rumor that Adrian had discovered evidence of something far worse than simple forgery, something that would destroy not just the men involved, but the entire system they represented. The rumor didn't have to be true. It just had to be believable enough to make Pemberton and Ashworth panic. We need someone they trust to deliver the message, Adrian said, studying their notes as dawn broke outside. Someone who would have access to this kind of information. Catherine Wells, Eliza suggested. Adrian looked up sharply. My father's former housekeeper? The one who warned you? She came to me because she wanted to protect you, which means she has access to these men, or at least their circles. If she approached Pemberton with concerns about what you might reveal, he'd believe her. Adrian nodded slowly. Catherine was loyal to my father. If she's worried about protecting his memory, Pemberton would trust that motivation. Can we convince her to help us? I don't know, but I can try. They sent for Catherine that afternoon. She arrived at dusk, her sharp eyes taking in the papers, the brandy, the evidence of a sleepless night. So you didn't take my advice, she said to Eliza without preamble. No. Foolish girl. But there was something almost approving in Catherine's tone. And now you want my help with whatever scheme you've cooked up. Adrian explained the plan. Catherine listened in silence, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You're asking me to lie, she said finally. To men who could destroy me with a word. We're asking you to help us trap them with their own paranoia, Eliza corrected. You don't have to lie about the forgery. That's real. You just have to suggest that Adrian found evidence of something more. Let them fill in the gaps themselves. And if they don't panic, if they call your bluff, then we proceed with the original plan. Adrian confesses to Parliament, shows his evidence, and we weather whatever storm comes. Adrian's voice was steady. But Catherine, these men destroyed my father, turned him into someone who valued reputation over truth, who died drowning in lies he could never escape. If there's a chance to make them face consequences for that, I have to take it. Catherine studied him with those sharp eyes. You really are willing to burn everything, aren't you? Yes. Even knowing you'll probably lose. Especially knowing that. Adrian leaned forward. Because at least I'll lose as myself, not as the lie they created. Something shifted in Catherine's expression, a softness Eliza hadn't expected. Your father said almost those exact words to me once, she said quietly, right before he decided to bury the truth instead. I watched it destroy him. She stood, her decision made. I won't watch it destroy you too. I'll deliver your message. Relief flooded through Eliza. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, girl. This plan of yours is just as likely to get us all killed as it is to work. Catherine moved to the door, then paused. But I suppose that's the point, isn't it? Die free or live in chains. After she left, Adrian pulled Eliza into his arms. She went willingly, resting her head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. We're really doing this, she said. We're really doing this. We might die. Probably. I should be terrified. Are you? Eliza considered the question honestly. No. I feel alive. For the first time in my life, I feel like I matter. Adrian's arms tightened around her. You've always mattered, Eliza. You just finally found someone who could see it. The next 3 days were a careful dance of preparation and deception. Catherine delivered her message to Lord Pemberton, planting the seed that Adrian had found something far worse than simple forgery. Evidence of treason, she suggested, communications with foreign powers, something that would bring down not just individual men, but the entire structure of power they represented. It was a calculated gamble. Too small a threat, and they wouldn't panic. Too large, and they wouldn't believe it. But Catherine played her role perfectly, the loyal servant worried about her former employer's memory, desperate to protect it from worse revelations. Pemberton took the bait. The first sign came when one of Adrian's remaining allies in Parliament received a visit from Pemberton's chief solicitor, asking questions, probing for information about what evidence Adrian might have, what he planned to reveal. They're circling, Adrian reported to Eliza, trying to figure out how much we know. Good. Let them wonder. The second sign came 2 days later when Eliza received an unexpected visitor at Thornfield Estate, Lord Ashworth. She was in the garden when Mary came running to find her, her face pale with concern. Miss Eliza, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's urgent. Who? Lord Ashworth, miss. Every muscle in Eliza's body went rigid. Ashworth, here. The man who'd propositioned her, who'd looked at her like property, who was now one of the architects of their destruction. Tell him I'm not receiving visitors. I already did, miss. He said, Mary's voice dropped to a whisper. He said if you don't see him, he'll make sure your father goes to prison tomorrow. And he's got the papers to prove he can do it. The threat was clear and effective. Show him to the drawing room, Eliza said, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. And send word to the Duke immediately. Yes, miss. Eliza took a moment to compose herself before walking into the house. Every instinct screamed to run, to avoid this confrontation. But she'd chosen this path, chosen to stand and fight rather than hide. Time to prove she meant it. Lord Ashworth waited in the drawing room, examining the bare walls where portraits used to hang. He was older than she remembered, nearly 50 now, with silver threading through his dark hair. But his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, predatory. Miss Thornfield, he turned as she entered, his smile not reaching those cold eyes. How lovely to see you again, though I must say you've grown even more beautiful since you so publicly humiliated me 6 years ago. Lord Ashworth, Eliza kept her voice level. I'm afraid you've wasted a trip. I have nothing to say to you. No? Not even when I hold your father's future in my hands? He pulled papers from his coat. Debts assigned to me just yesterday. £30,000 due immediately. I could have him arrested within the hour. Then do it. Eliza met his gaze without flinching. My father made his own choices. I won't beg you for mercy he doesn't deserve. Ashworth's smile widened. How very noble, and how very stupid. You see, Miss Thornfield, I'm not here about your father. I'm here about your fiancé. The Duke has nothing to do with you. Doesn't he? Ashworth moved closer, and Eliza forced herself to stand her ground. You're about to marry a man planning to destroy himself and everyone around him, including you. I'm here to offer you a way out. I don't want your help. Don't you? He was close enough now that she could smell the brandy on his breath. The Duke is planning to make certain accusations. Accusations that would damage powerful men, including myself. I'm here to make sure those accusations never see the light of day. By threatening me? By offering you a choice. Ashworth's voice dropped. Break off the engagement, publicly, cite his instability, his wild conspiracy theories. Do it before the wedding, and I'll forgive your father's debts. You and your family will be free. Eliza's heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. And if I refuse? Then when the Duke makes his accusations and is inevitably destroyed, you'll be destroyed with him. Your family will lose everything. Your father will go to prison. Your mother, well, women of her breeding don't survive in debtors' quarters. And you? His smile turned cruel. You'll be the disgraced wife of a madman. No prospects, no future, nothing. You're asking me to betray him. I'm asking you to save yourself. Ashworth reached out to touch her face, and it took every ounce of Eliza's control not to flinch away. You're a smart woman, Miss Thornfield. Too smart to throw your life away for a man you barely know. Choose wisely. The door burst open. Adrian stood in the doorway, his face a mask of cold fury. Behind him, two men Eliza didn't recognize, large, well-armed, clearly not servants. Take your hands off my fiancé, Adrian said, his voice deadly quiet. Ashworth stepped back, but his smile didn't falter. Your Grace, how unexpected. Is it? You threatened my future wife. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Adrian moved into the room, his bodyguards flanking him. Mary sent word the moment you arrived. I threatened nothing. I made her an offer. The same way you offered yourself to her when she was 17? Adrian's control slipped fractionally, rage bleeding through. The same way you've offered yourself to how many other young women over the years? Ashworth's expression hardened. Careful, Your Grace. You're on very thin ice already. Am I? Adrian pulled papers from his own coat. These are sworn statements from 3 women you propositioned inappropriately. Women who are afraid to speak because of your power, but they're not afraid anymore. Eliza's breath caught. He'd gathered evidence against Ashworth, real evidence. Those statements are lies, Ashworth snarled. Are they? Shall we test that in court? Because I'm more than willing to make this public, Ashworth. Every sordid detail, every young woman you intimidated, every time you used your position to— Enough! Ashworth's composure cracked. You want to play this game? Fine. But know that when I destroy you, I'll make sure your precious fiancée suffers most. I'll make sure everyone knows she's nothing but a desperate whore who sold herself to a fraud. The words hung in the air like poison. Adrian moved so fast Eliza barely saw it. One moment he was across the room. The next, he had Ashworth by the throat, slamming him against the wall. Say that again, Adrian growled. Say one more word about her and I swear I'll— Adrian, stop! Eliza grabbed his arm. He's not worth it. For a terrible moment, she thought Adrian wouldn't listen. His hand tightened on Ashworth's throat, rage blazing in his dark eyes. Then he released him, shoving him away with disgust. Ashworth stumbled, gasping for air. When he looked up, his eyes were filled with hate. You just assaulted a peer of the realm, he wheezed, in front of witnesses. My witnesses, Adrian corrected, who will swear you attacked me first. Choose your next move carefully, Ashworth, because I promise you, if you come after Eliza again, if you so much as speak her name, I will burn you to the ground. You're going to burn anyway. Ashworth straightened his coat with trembling hands. Both of you, and when you do, I'll be there to watch. He fled the room, his footsteps echoing through the hollow house. The moment he was gone, Eliza's legs gave out. She sank onto the sofa, shaking with adrenaline and rage and relief. Adrian dismissed his bodyguards, then knelt before her, taking her hands in his. Are you all right? His voice was gentle now, all the fury drained away. He threatened my family, threatened to destroy everything if I didn't betray you. I know. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated. No! Eliza squeezed his hands. You warned me this would happen, that they'd come after anyone close to you. I chose this path knowing the cost. But to hear him speak to you that way, to threaten you, Adrian's jaw clenched. I wanted to kill him, Eliza. For a moment, I actually wanted to, but you didn't. She cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. You controlled yourself. That's the difference between you and men like him. Is it? Because right now I'm not sure. I am. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. And Adrian? Those statements you had from the other women, that was brilliant. Catherine helped me find them. Women who'd been too afraid to speak, but who were willing to give testimony if it meant stopping him from hurting anyone else. His hands tightened on hers. I'm going to make him pay, Eliza. Not just for what he did to you, but for all of them. We're going to make him pay, she corrected. Together. Adrian pulled her into his arms, and they sat there in the ruined drawing room, holding each other while the afternoon light faded to evening. Outside, the world was closing in. Pemberton and Ashworth circling like wolves. Society sharpening its knives. The wedding approaching like an execution date. But in that moment, in each other's arms, they were unbreakable. The attack came 3 days before the wedding. Eliza woke to the smell of smoke. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then she heard the shouting, the crash of breaking glass, the unmistakable roar of flames. She ran to her window and froze. The East Wing was on fire. Not the closed, abandoned East Wing. The section where her parents' bedroom was, where Mary slept, where the last remnants of their lives were stored. "Mother!" Eliza screamed, running for the door. The hallway was already filling with smoke. She could hear her mother's voice somewhere ahead, crying for help. Eliza grabbed a heavy blanket from her room, soaking it in the wash basin before wrapping it around herself. Then she plunged into the smoke. The heat was incredible, choking. She could barely see, barely breathe, but she pushed forward, following her mother's voice. She found Margaret in the hallway, frozen with terror as flames licked up the walls. "Eliza! Oh God, Eliza! Come on!" Eliza grabbed her mother's arm, pulling her toward the stairs. "We have to move." "Your father, he went to get the documents." "Where?" "The study." The study was in the burning section, the part of the house the flames had already consumed. "Mother, go!" Eliza shoved Margaret toward the stairs. "Get out now!" "Eliza, what are you—" But Eliza was already running back into the smoke, the wet blanket over her head, toward the study where her father had gone to save papers that didn't matter while the world burned around him. She found him collapsed just outside the study door, overcome by smoke, his arms full of worthless documents. "Father!" She dropped to her knees beside him, checking for breath. Still alive. Barely. The flames were closer now, so close she could feel her skin blistering from the heat. She couldn't carry him, wasn't strong enough, but she could drag him. Eliza hooked her arms under his shoulders and pulled. He was heavier than she'd expected, dead weight dragging against the floor. The smoke was so thick she couldn't see, could barely breathe, her lungs screaming for air. 1 foot, then another, inch by terrible inch. The flames chased them like living things, hungry and relentless. Eliza's vision started to gray at the edges. Her arms were giving out. She wasn't going to make it. They weren't going to— Strong hands grabbed her, lifting her and her father both. Adrian. He appeared through the smoke like something out of a dream, his face covered with a wet cloth, his eyes fierce with determination. "I've got him!" he shouted over the roar of the flames. "Move!" Together they hauled her father through the burning house, down the stairs, out into the night, where servants and neighbors had gathered to watch the mansion burn. They made it 20 feet from the house before the roof collapsed. The sound was like the end of the world. Timber crashing, glass shattering, the whole structure folding in on itself in a shower of sparks and flame. Eliza stood frozen, watching everything she'd ever known disappear into fire and ash. "Eliza," Adrian's voice urgent. "Eliza, look at me." She turned to find him covered in soot, his coat singed, a burn mark on his cheek, but his eyes were clear, focused on her. "You're all right," he said. "You're safe. That's what matters. The house is just a house. Everything, all of it, can be replaced." He pulled her close, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "You can't be replaced." The fire brigade arrived an hour later, but it was too late. Thornfield estate burned to the ground, taking with it every last piece of the family's history. By dawn, only the smoking shell remained. Eliza sat on the lawn with her parents, wrapped in borrowed blankets, watching the ruins smolder. Her father was conscious now, coughing but alive. Her mother held his hand, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. Adrian stood with the fire brigade captain, his expression grim. When he came back, Eliza knew before he spoke. "It was arson," she said. "Yes." Adrian's voice was flat. "They found evidence of accelerant in 3 different locations. This wasn't an accident, Eliza. Someone tried to kill you." "Ashworth." "Probably. Or Pemberton, or both." His hands clenched into fists. "This is my fault. I brought this on you." "No!" Eliza stood, her legs shaky but her voice strong. "They did this. Not you. They're the ones who set the fire. They're the ones who would rather commit murder than face the truth." But nothing." She grabbed his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "This is what we're fighting against, Adrian. Men who burn houses, who threaten families, who would rather destroy everything than admit they're wrong." Her voice cracked. "And now they've made it personal." Adrian studied her face, and whatever he saw there made something shift in his expression. "What are you thinking?" he asked quietly. "I'm thinking we move up the wedding. Tomorrow. We get married tomorrow, make it legal and binding before they can try something else. And then," her smile was cold, hard. Nothing like the woman she'd been a month ago. "Then we show them exactly what happens when you try to burn Eliza Thornfield alive." Adrian's answering smile was just as cold, just as hard. "Tomorrow, then," he agreed. Behind them, Thornfield Estate collapsed further, sending up a fresh column of sparks into the dawn sky. And Eliza watched it burn, feeling something inside her harden into steel. They'd tried to make her afraid, tried to make her run. They'd only made her dangerous. They were married in Adrian's private chapel at dawn, with only Catherine Wells and 2 of Adrian's most trusted guards as witnesses. No flowers, no music, no pretense that this was anything other than what it was. A declaration of war dressed in wedding vows. Eliza wore a simple dress borrowed from Catherine, her hair still smelling faintly of smoke from the night before. Adrian's coat bore scorch marks he hadn't bothered to hide. They looked like survivors, not newlyweds. "Do you, Eliza Thornfield, take this man—" "I do," she interrupted the priest. No hesitation, no doubt. Adrian's hand tightened on hers. "Do you, Adrian Blackmore?" "I do." The priest looked between them, clearly unsettled by their intensity. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife," Adrian finished. He pulled Eliza close and kissed her, hard and claiming and absolutely certain. When they broke apart, Eliza saw something fierce burning in his eyes. "Now what?" she asked. "Now, we fight back." They left the chapel as the sun broke over London, casting the city in shades of gold and shadow. Adrian's carriage waited, but instead of taking them to his townhouse, it headed toward the heart of the city, toward Parliament. "What are we doing?" Eliza asked as the familiar buildings came into view. "Changing the game." Adrian pulled a leather portfolio from beneath the seat. "Ashworth and Pemberton think they can intimidate us into silence, burn our house, threaten our families, destroy our reputations before we can speak. But they made one critical mistake." "What's that?" "They assumed we'd wait, that we'd give them time to build their defenses, spread their lies, position themselves as the victims of a madman's accusations." His smile was sharp. "We're not going to wait." "You're going to confess today?" "We're going to confess today." He handed her the portfolio. "These are copies of everything, the forged documents, the witness statements from Ashworth's victims, evidence of Pemberton's involvement in the conspiracy, everything we plan to reveal." Eliza's hands trembled as she took the papers. "Adrian, if we do this now, without preparation, without allies in place, we'll force their hand, make them react instead of attack. They're expecting us to hide, to cower, to give them time to destroy us quietly." He covered her hands with his. "Let's give them chaos instead." The carriage stopped outside Parliament. Through the window, Eliza could see the morning session beginning, lords and members filing in with their practiced arrogance, their certainty that the world would continue to bend to their will. "Are you ready?" Adrian asked. Eliza thought about her family's burned estate, about the women Ashworth had silenced, about every lie these men had told to protect their power. "I'm ready." They entered Parliament like invaders, side by side, drawing stares from everyone they passed. A duchess in a borrowed dress and soot-stained boots. A duke with burns on his face and revolution in his eyes. "Your Grace!" A clerk tried to intercept them. "The session has already begun. You can't—" "Get out of my way," Adrian said quietly. Something in his voice made the clerk step back. They walked into the main chamber just as Lord Pemberton was holding forth on some minor matter of taxation. He saw them and froze mid-sentence, his face going pale. "Lord Pemberton," Adrian called out, his voice carrying across the chamber. "I'm glad you're here. This concerns you." The room erupted in whispers. Pemberton recovered quickly, his expression shifting to concern. "Your Grace, this is highly irregular. If you have a matter to discuss, the proper channels—" "I'm done with proper channels." Adrian moved to the center of the floor, Eliza at his side. "I'm here to tell the truth about something that's been hidden for 20 years. About forgery and conspiracy and the corruption that's rotted this institution from within." The whispers grew louder. Someone called for order. "Your Grace," the speaker intervened, "you cannot simply—" "I can and I will." Adrian's voice cut through the noise. "My name is Adrian Blackmore. I hold the title Duke of Ashford, and that title is a lie." Silence crashed over the chamber like a physical force. Pemberton was on his feet. "Your Grace, you're clearly overwrought. The fire at your fiancé's estate—" "My wife's estate," Adrian corrected. "We were married this morning, and the fire was arson, Lord Pemberton. An attempt to silence us before we could speak. Did you know about that?" "How dare you? Did you know?" Adrian's voice was steel. "Did you know that someone tried to burn my wife alive to protect a secret you've been hiding for 2 decades? The chamber exploded, lords shouting, demanding order, demanding explanations. Through it all, Eliza stood frozen, watching Pemberton's face cycle through shock, rage, and something that looked almost like fear. "I don't know what you're talking about," Pemberton said, but his voice shook. "Don't you?" Adrian pulled documents from the portfolio. "These are forged baptismal records, marriage certificates that never existed, witness statements from people who were paid to lie. All of it created 20 years ago to legitimize my birth and secure my father's title. This is madness. This is truth." Adrian threw the papers onto the floor between them. "My father was the Duke of Ashford. My mother was his mistress. I am illegitimate. And you, Lord Pemberton, along with Lord Ashworth and 3 other men in this chamber, helped my father commit fraud to hide that fact." Ashworth stood from his seat, his face purple with rage. "You cannot prove these wild accusations." "Can't I?" Eliza stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. "These accusations aren't wild, Lord Ashworth. They're documented, witnessed, irrefutable. And who are you to speak in these chambers?" Ashworth sneered. "A ruined woman who married a madman?" "I'm the Duchess of Ashford," Eliza said clearly, "and I'm also one of the women you propositioned when I was 17. The one who refused you and ruined her family's reputation rather than submit to your advances." The whispers turned to gasps. "She's lying," Ashworth snarled. "Is she?" Adrian pulled more papers from the portfolio. "Here are sworn statements from 3 other women. Women you intimidated, women you threatened, women who are willing to testify about your conduct if you continue to deny it." Ashworth went very still. "You see," Adrian continued, his voice calm now, almost gentle, "you made a mistake when you tried to destroy us. You assumed we'd fight like you do, with threats and intimidation and backroom deals. But we're not fighting to protect power. We're fighting for truth. And truth doesn't need to hide." "Enough!" Pemberton's voice cracked. "This is a circus. You storm in here making wild claims, throwing around unsubstantiated documents. Then let's substantiate them," a new voice said. Everyone turned. Catherine Wells stood in the gallery, flanked by 2 men Eliza didn't recognize. "Who are you?" the speaker demanded. "Catherine Wells. I was housekeeper to the late Duke of Ashford for 20 years. I witnessed the forgery. I know who was involved. and I'm prepared to testify to everything. Pemberton's face went white. Catherine, you don't know what you're... Don't I? Catherine's voice was cold. I watched you and Ashworth conspire with the Duke. Watched you bribe priests and clerks. Watched you create an entire false history to hide an inconvenient truth. I stayed silent because I was loyal to my employer. But he's dead. And you tried to murder this woman to keep your secret. She pointed at Eliza. She pointed at, That's where my loyalty ends. The chamber erupted again. Lords demanding answers, calling for investigations, splitting into factions. Some defending Pemberton and Ashworth, others calling for their immediate resignation. Through it all, Pemberton stood frozen, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Then he made his fatal mistake. Fine, he shouted over the chaos. Fine. Yes, we helped the Duke falsify records, but it was to protect the title, to preserve the stability of... You're confessing? Adrian interrupted quietly. Pemberton realized too late what he'd done. No, that's not... You just confessed before witnesses to conspiracy and fraud. Adrian's smile was terrible to see. In your panic to defend yourself, you admitted everything. Pemberton's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. And you, Lord Ashworth? Eliza turned to face him. Do you also want to confess? Or would you prefer we call those 3 women to testify about your conduct? Ashworth's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Eliza thought he might actually attack her right there in the chamber. Then he turned and fled. The symbolism was perfect. A powerful lord running from the truth like a coward. The chamber descended into absolute chaos. Adrian took Eliza's hand and led her out through the shouting, past the reporters who'd already gathered outside, into the cold morning air. Did we just... Eliza started. Yes. Adrian pulled her close, laughing with something that sounded like disbelief. We just brought down 2 of the most powerful men in England. They'll fight back. Of course they will, but now it's public. Now there will be investigations, hearings, testimony. They can't bury this. He cupped her face, his eyes bright with fierce joy. You were magnificent. I was terrified. So was I. He kissed her forehead. But we did it anyway. The next 3 days were a blur of testimony, investigations, and newspaper headlines that grew more sensational by the hour. Duke admits illegitimacy. Parliament in chaos. Lords Pemberton and Ashworth implicated in 20-year fraud. The Duchess who wouldn't be silenced. Eliza sat in Adrian's study, surrounded by newspapers, watching their stories spread across England like wildfire. They're calling you a hero, Adrian said, reading over her shoulder. The woman who stood up to corrupt lords and survived assassination to tell the truth. They're calling you a martyr, the noble duke who sacrificed everything for honesty. We're both being romanticized beyond recognition. He set down the paper, but at least they're paying attention. A knock on the door interrupted them. One of Adrian's guards entered, looking uncertain. Your Grace, there's a delegation here to see you, from Parliament. Adrian and Eliza exchanged glances. Show them in, Adrian said. 5 men entered, Lords Eliza recognized from the chamber. Not Pemberton's allies, but not Adrian's either. Neutral parties caught in the middle of a scandal they hadn't anticipated. Your Grace, Your Grace. The leader, Lord Sheffield, bowed to each of them. We've come to discuss the situation. What situation? Adrian asked coolly. Your title, your confession, the implications for the peerage. Sheffield shifted uncomfortably. There are those calling for your immediate removal from Parliament, for your title to be stripped, your lands confiscated. Let them try, Eliza said quietly. Sheffield blinked at her. Your Grace? Let them try to punish him for telling the truth. Let them prove that honesty is a crime worthy of destruction. See how that plays with the people reading these newspapers. She gestured to the headlines. See how that looks when the common folk realize their leaders would rather protect lies than reward courage. Sheffield went very still. You're threatening us. I'm stating facts. Eliza stood, moving to stand beside Adrian. You have a choice. You can try to destroy my husband for his honesty and face the public outcry that will follow. Or you can acknowledge that he did what no one else had the courage to do. Tell the truth about a corrupt system. But his title is secondary to his integrity. Adrian's voice was firm. I came forward prepared to lose everything. If you want to strip my title, go ahead. I'll still be able to sleep at night. The lords exchanged uncomfortable glances. There is, Sheffield said slowly, another option. Which is? Parliament could acknowledge your confession, investigate the fraud, punish those involved, Pemberton, Ashworth, the others, but recognize that you yourself were a victim of your father's deception, that you came forward voluntarily, that you've shown integrity rare among our ranks. He paused. We could allow you to retain your title as an appointed duke, if not a hereditary one, a recognition of your service in exposing corruption. Adrian stared at him. You want to reward me? We want to avoid looking like hypocrites who punish honesty while protecting liars. Sheffield's expression was wry. Politics, Your Grace. Your confession put us in an impossible position. This is the least damaging way forward. And Pemberton, Ashworth? Will be investigated fully. If the evidence supports your claims, and it appears to, they'll face consequences. Removal from their positions at minimum. Possibly criminal charges. Sheffield's voice hardened. We won't protect them. Not after what they tried to do to you and your wife. Eliza felt Adrian's hand find hers, squeezing tight. I need time to consider, Adrian said. Of course. We'll await your response. Sheffield bowed again. For what it's worth, Your Grace, both of you, what you did took extraordinary courage. Whether you accept our offer or not, that won't be forgotten. After they left, Eliza and Adrian stood in silence. They're offering you everything back, Eliza said finally. Your title, your position, everything you were prepared to lose. I know. What do you want to do? Adrian turned to face her fully. What do you think I should do? Eliza considered. A month ago, she would have said, take it, secure their future, accept the victory. But she was different now. Harder, clearer about what mattered. I think, she said slowly, that you should do whatever lets you sleep at night. If keeping the title feels like accepting their permission to exist, refuse it. If it feels like an opportunity to change things from within, take it. She took his hands. But don't decide based on what I need or what society expects. Decide based on who you are. Adrian pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers. Who am I, Eliza? You're the man who burned his life down for the truth. You're the man who stood in Parliament and confessed everything, knowing it would destroy you. You're the man who, her voice caught, who saved me from that fire, who married me at dawn and went to war beside me. And you're the woman who walked into that chamber and faced down Ashworth without flinching, who turned their attack into our weapon, who, he cupped her face, who made me believe that being myself was worth more than any title they could give or take. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the study while outside, England tried to make sense of what they'd done. I'm going to accept their offer, Adrian said finally, not because I need the title, but because I can do more good with it than without it. I can push for reforms, shine light on other corruptions, use my position to protect people who can't protect themselves. Like those women Ashworth hurt, exactly like them. His expression hardened. Pemberton and Ashworth aren't the only corrupt lords. They're just the ones we had evidence against. But there are others, so many others. Then we keep fighting, Eliza said simply. We keep fighting, Adrian agreed. The newspapers the next day carried Adrian's response to Parliament's offer. He would accept the title, but only with conditions: full transparency about his parentage, ongoing investigations into noble corruption, and reforms to prevent future fraud. And he demanded that the women Ashworth had victimized be allowed to testify publicly, their voices heard and validated. Parliament had no choice but to agree. The hearings began 2 weeks later. Eliza sat in the gallery watching as woman after woman took the stand to describe Ashworth's predation. Their courage broke her heart and rebuilt it stronger. Ashworth himself didn't attend. He'd fled to his country estate, refusing to face the accusations. But his absence was its own confession. Pemberton came, though, sat stone-faced through testimony about his conspiracy, his fraud, his willingness to commit murder to protect his secrets. When the verdict came down, removal from all positions, criminal fraud charges, complete disgrace. He finally looked at Adrian. "I hope you're satisfied," he said bitterly. "I'm not," Adrian replied. "But I can live with myself. Can you?" Pemberton had no answer. That evening, Eliza and Adrian stood on the balcony of his townhouse, watching London spread out before them in a sea of lamplight. "Catherine came to see me today," Eliza said. "She wanted to thank us. Said watching those women testify was the bravest thing she'd ever seen. She was brave too, coming forward, risking everything. She said something else." Eliza leaned against the railing. "She said your father would have been proud, that he spent his whole life wishing he had the courage to do what you did." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if he would have been proud, but I hope he would have understood that sometimes the only way to honor someone is to refuse to make their mistakes." Something like that. Eliza took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "What happens now?" "Now we rebuild. Your family needs a new home. I've already arranged for a house in the city. Your father's debts are cleared. Your mother is safe. And us?" Adrian turned to face her, his dark eyes reflecting the lamplight. "Us, we get to decide. No more running from who we are. No more hiding behind lies or expectations or fear. Just ourselves. Together." Sounds dangerous. Probably. Sounds perfect. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both breathless, Eliza saw something in his face she hadn't seen before. Peace. "I love you," Adrian said. Simple. True. No hesitation. Eliza's breath caught. They'd married for survival, for partnership, for the shared need to burn the world down and rebuild it better. But somewhere in the fire and fury, in the dawn wedding and the Parliament confrontation, in facing death and choosing truth, they'd found something real. "I love you too," she said. Below them, London continued its endless chaos. Above them, stars appeared one by one in the darkening sky. And between them, something fierce and unbreakable and utterly their own. The scandal would continue for weeks. The investigations would take months. The reforms Adrian pushed for would face resistance and compromise and slow, grinding progress. But they'd won the battle that mattered. They'd proven that truth could survive fire, that courage could topple corruption, that two people willing to risk everything could change the world. And every morning, when Eliza woke beside Adrian in their bed, when she looked in the mirror and saw not the decorative daughter or the desperate woman or the victim of circumstance, but someone who'd chosen her own path and walked it without apology, she knew it had all been worth it. The newspapers called her a hero, society called her scandalous, Parliament called her a force of nature, but Adrian called her by her name, Eliza, his wife, his partner, his equal. And that was the only title that mattered. 3 months after the confession that shook Parliament, Eliza stood in the ruins of Thornfield Estate and felt nothing but possibility. The fire had taken everything, the crumbling mansion, the neglected gardens, the physical weight of generations of decline. But the land remained, 20 acres of potential waiting to be transformed into something new. "What are you thinking?" Adrian asked, coming to stand beside her. "I'm thinking we don't rebuild," Eliza said. "Not a house, not a monument to what was, something different." "Like what?" She turned to face him, the idea crystallizing as she spoke. "A school, for girls like I was. Girls who are too smart, too defiant, too much for society to tolerate. Give them education, opportunity, a place where being themselves isn't a liability." Adrian's eyes lit with understanding. "A sanctuary. A weapon." Eliza's smile was fierce. "Train them to think, to speak, to fight for themselves. Send them into the world as forces that can't be ignored or silenced. Society will hate it." "Good." He laughed, pulling her close. "You're going to change the world, aren't you?" "We're going to change the world," she corrected. "Together." The sound of hooves on the road made them turn. A carriage approached, expensive, official, bearing the royal crest. Adrian's expression tightened. "That's the Lord Chancellor's carriage." "Another hearing?" "I don't know." The carriage stopped, and Lord Sheffield emerged, but his expression wasn't hostile, it was almost pleased. "Your Grace, Your Grace." He bowed to each of them. I apologize for the intrusion, but I have news that couldn't wait. What news? Adrian asked carefully. Lord Ashworth is dead. The words hung in the air like smoke. How? Eliza asked. His own hand, apparently. He was found this morning in his study with a pistol and a letter confessing to everything. The conspiracy, the attacks on you, the arson. Sheffield's voice was neutral, but his eyes held something like satisfaction. He couldn't face the trial. Couldn't bear to hear those women testify against him publicly. Eliza felt a complicated tangle of emotions. Relief, vindication, and something darker, the knowledge that even in death, Ashworth had taken the coward's way out. The letter clears you of any lingering doubts, Sheffield continued, exonerates the Duke completely, and it implicates 3 other lords we hadn't yet identified. The investigation will continue, but your graces, this is over. You won. We didn't win, Adrian said quietly. Those women he hurt, they're the ones who won, by being brave enough to speak. Sheffield nodded slowly. There's something else. The king wishes to see you, both of you, tomorrow at noon. Eliza's stomach dropped. The king? His Majesty has been following the case closely. He has questions and a proposal. Sheffield's expression was unreadable. I suggest you prepare carefully. This audience could change everything. After he left, Eliza and Adrian stood in silence, processing. What do you think he wants? Eliza asked. I don't know, but with Ashworth dead and Pemberton disgraced, we've essentially exposed corruption at the highest levels of government. Either the king will embrace reform, or he'll see us as a threat to the entire system. Exactly. Eliza took Adrian's hand. Then we go in as we always have, honest, unafraid, together. Together, he agreed. The palace was overwhelming in its grandeur. Eliza had never been this close to royalty, had never imagined she would be. But she walked through the gilded halls beside Adrian with her head high, refusing to be intimidated. They were shown to a private audience chamber, smaller than she'd expected, more intimate. The king sat not on a throne, but in a chair by the fireplace, looking more like a man than a monarch. Your Majesties, Adrian said, bowing. Eliza curtsied, her heart pounding. Duke, Duchess. The king gestured for them to rise. Sit, please. This is not a formal audience. They sat, and the king studied them with shrewd eyes that had seen decades of political maneuvering. You've caused quite a stir, he said finally. We apologize for the disruption, Your Majesty, Adrian began, but the king waved him off. Don't. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to have the courage to do what you did. He leaned forward. Your father came to me once, wanted to confess. I told him it would destroy too many good men, that the stability of the realm required some secrets to stay buried. I was wrong. Eliza's breath caught. The king himself had known about the conspiracy. Your Majesty, Adrian started, I enabled corruption by valuing stability over truth. I let men like Pemberton and Ashworth believe they were untouchable, and innocent people suffered for it. The king's expression was heavy with regret. You've shown me the cost of that choice, and you've given me an opportunity to make it right. How? Eliza asked, finding her voice. By supporting reform. Real reform. Not just investigating this conspiracy, but examining the entire system that allowed it to flourish. He stood, pacing to the window. I want you, Duke Blackmore, to head a royal commission. Root out corruption wherever you find it. You've proven you can't be bought or intimidated. That's what I need. Adrian went very still. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but you're about to say you're illegitimate, that your position is compromised, that you're not the right person for this. The king turned back. All of which is precisely why you are the right person. You have nothing left to lose, no reputation to protect, no illusions about nobility automatically conferring nobility of character. And me? Eliza asked. The question was bold, possibly inappropriate, but she'd come too far to stay silent. The king smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. My daughter, the Princess Royal, has been petitioning me for years to establish educational opportunities for young women. I've resisted, fearing the social upheaval. But after watching you stand in Parliament and dismantle two powerful lords with nothing but truth and courage, he shook his head. I'd be a fool not to harness that force for good. You want me to help establish schools? Eliza's voice trembled. I want you to revolutionize how we educate women in this country, starting with your school on the Thornfield lands. Royal patronage, funding, protection from those who will inevitably try to shut you down. His eyes glinted. Turn it into a model that spreads across England. Show us all what women can do when given the same opportunities as men. Eliza couldn't breathe, couldn't process what she was hearing. The king himself, was offering her the power to change everything. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this? Because my wife has been lecturing me for 30 years about the wasted potential of half our population. Because my daughter is brilliant and chafes at the limitations imposed on her. Because you proved that women's voices matter. He smiled. And because watching you two burn down corruption was the most honest thing I've witnessed in my entire reign. I want more of that honesty, especially if, it makes people uncomfortable. Adrian found Eliza's hand, squeezing tight. We accept, he said, both commissions, with gratitude and humility. Good, because I'm not done. The king returned to his seat. There's one more thing. The Ashford title, your current title, carries too much baggage, too many associations with your father's deception. I'm creating a new title for you, Duke of Thornfield. Eliza gasped. Named not for a crumbling estate, the king continued, but for the woman who rose from its ashes and changed England. Your children will inherit a title earned by courage, not fabricated by fraud. He looked at Eliza. If that's acceptable to you, Duchess. Tears blurred Eliza's vision. Thornfield, her family's name transformed from a symbol of decline into something powerful and new. It's more than acceptable, Your Majesty, she managed. It's perfect. The news of their royal commission spread through London like wildfire. The Duke and Duchess of Thornfield, no longer Ashford, no longer tainted by fraud, but bearing a new title earned through integrity, were now agents of reform backed by the crown itself. The reaction was predictably divided. Half of society celebrated them as heroes ushering in a new era. The other half condemned them as dangerous radicals destroying tradition. Eliza didn't care about either camp. She cared about the letter she received 3 days after the royal audience, written in a shaky hand. Your Grace, I was one of the women who testified against Lord Ashworth. I wanted to thank you for giving me the courage to speak. For years, I believed what happened to me was my fault, that I should have been quieter, more careful, more acceptable. Watching you stand in Parliament and refuse to be silenced showed me that my voice matters too. I'm applying to your school when it opens. I want to learn. I want to become someone who can't be broken. With deepest gratitude, Sarah Mitchell. Eliza read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Good news? Adrian asked, finding her in their study. The best news. She handed him the letter. This is why we did it, not for titles or commissions or royal favor, for this. Adrian read it, his expression softening. How many applications have you received? 43, just from this week. Eliza moved to the window overlooking the garden where plans for the school were taking shape. Girls from all over England asking for a chance, asking to be educated, to be taken seriously, to matter. You're giving them that. We're giving them that. She turned to face him. I couldn't do this without you. Your position, your resources, your willingness to stand beside me even when society thinks I'm mad. You're not mad. You're revolutionary. He crossed to her, pulling her close. And I'm just grateful I get to witness it. 6 months later, the Thornfield Academy for Young Women opened its doors. Not on the ruins of the old estate, but on land adjacent to it. The burned shell of the mansion preserved as a reminder of what they'd survived, what they'd overcome. 50 girls arrived that first term, daughters of merchants and farmers, of minor nobility and working families. United not by birth, but by brilliance and hunger for something more than society allowed them. Eliza stood at the entrance, greeting each one personally. Welcome, she said to Sarah Mitchell, now 17 and no longer shaking. Welcome to a place where your voice matters. The curriculum was radical. Not just music and needlework and the decorative arts, but mathematics and science, philosophy and law, languages and literature and political theory. Everything Eliza had taught herself in secret, now taught openly to girls who would carry that knowledge into a world that wasn't ready for them. Adrian's commission was equally transformative. In the first year alone, his investigations uncovered corruption in 12 different government departments. 7 more lords resigned in disgrace. The system that had protected men like Pemberton and Ashworth began, slowly, painfully, to change. But the real revolution was quieter, more personal. It was in the letters Eliza received from former students who went on to become scholars, physicians, lawyers, careers previously closed to women. It was in the other schools that opened, modeled on Thornfield's example, spreading across England and beyond. It was in the slow shift of society's understanding that women's potential was limited not by nature, but by deliberate constraint. 2 years after the fire that destroyed her family's estate, Eliza stood in the Great Hall of Thornfield Academy, watching her students perform a debate on political philosophy. Adrian joined her, slipping his hand into hers. "They're extraordinary," he said. "They always were. They just needed someone to see it." One of the girls, Margaret, named after Eliza's mother, was arguing passionately about the social contract, her voice clear and confident. She caught Eliza's eye and smiled before continuing her argument. "Do you ever regret it?" Adrian asked quietly. "The scandal, the fire, everything we went through?" Eliza considered the question honestly. She thought about the girl she'd been 3 years ago, angry, defiant, but ultimately trapped by circumstances beyond her control. Measured by her value in society's marriage market, defined by her family's declining status. Then she looked around the hall, at these girls who would never have to make themselves smaller to be acceptable, who would enter the world armed with knowledge and confidence and the absolute certainty that they belonged anywhere they chose to be. "No," she said, "I don't regret any of it. Every scar, every fight, every moment I thought we wouldn't survive. It all led here. To this. To them." "To us," Adrian added. "To us," she agreed. That night, after the students were settled in their dormitories, Eliza and Adrian walked through the gardens toward the preserved ruins of the old mansion. They'd left it deliberately, a monument not to what was lost, but to what was reborn from the ashes. "I received a letter from your mother today," Adrian said. "She wanted you to know that she's proud of you." Eliza's relationship with her parents had evolved into something more honest, if less comfortable. Her father had found work managing an estate in the north, honest work that kept him sober and purposeful. Her mother had discovered a talent for watercolors and now sold her paintings in London galleries. They'd all survived the fire and found versions of themselves that weren't defined by a dying title or crushing debt. "She also said," Adrian continued, "that she always knew you were meant for something extraordinary. She just didn't realize how extraordinary until you stopped trying to fit into the box she'd built for you." "That's generous of her. It's honest." Adrian stopped at the edge of the ruins, looking up at the skeleton of the east wing silhouetted against the night sky. "We all spent so long trying to preserve what was, the estate, the title, the lie. It took losing everything to see what we could become." Eliza leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his presence. "Do you think we've won? Really won? What does winning look like to you?" She thought about it. "A world where girls like Sarah don't have to be silent, where men like Ashworth face consequences, where truth matters more than reputation." "Then yes," Adrian said, "we're winning, not finished. This kind of change takes generations. But winning." A sound from the dormitories. Laughter, young and unrestrained. The sound of girls who'd never been taught to make themselves quiet. "Listen to that," Eliza said. "That's the sound of the world changing. That's the sound of you changing the world." She turned to face him, this man who'd offered her a choice when everyone else offered only cages, who'd stood beside her when she chose fire over safety, who'd helped her transform destruction into creation. "We changed it together," she said, "and we're not done yet." 5 years after their wedding at dawn, Adrian and Eliza stood before Parliament once more. But this time Adrian wasn't confessing. He was presenting the findings of his Royal Commission, a comprehensive report on corruption in government, with recommendations for reform that would reshape the entire system. And Eliza stood beside him, not as a witness or a victim, but as an equal partner whose insights had shaped half the report. The Commission finds, Adrian read, his voice carrying across the chamber, that corruption flourishes in darkness, that power without accountability breeds abuse, that the solution is not to protect comfortable lies, but to demand uncomfortable truth. He outlined their recommendations: transparency requirements, independent oversight, consequences for abuse of power, and most radically, provisions for women to testify in their own right, not as extensions of fathers or husbands, but as individuals with legal standing. The chamber erupted, as it always did, but this time the voices supporting reform were louder than those opposing it. When the vote came, the reforms passed. Not unanimously, not without compromise, but they passed. England would never be the same. After the session, as they walked out into the London twilight, a young woman approached them. She wore the simple dress of a working woman, but she carried herself with quiet confidence. "Your Graces," she said, curtsying, "I'm Eleanor Ross. I was one of the first students at Thornfield Academy. I wanted to thank you." "For what?" Eliza asked. "For everything. I'm starting my medical training next month. First woman accepted to the Royal College of Physicians." Eleanor's eyes shone with pride and determination. "They tried to reject me, said women weren't suited for medicine, but I showed them my transcripts from Thornfield, showed them what a woman's education could accomplish when given the chance." Eliza's throat tightened. "You did that yourself. We just opened the door." "You did more than that. You taught me that I don't need permission to be extraordinary, that my voice, my mind, my ambitions, they're not flaws to be corrected. They're weapons to be wielded." Eleanor smiled. "You changed my life, Your Grace, and through me, I'll change others. That's the real revolution, isn't it? Not one moment of dramatic change, but thousands of small victories that add up to transformation." After Eleanor left, Eliza stood frozen, Adrian's hand in hers. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm more than all right." She looked up at him, this man who'd seen her at her most defiant and loved her for it. "I'm exactly who I always wanted to be. Someone who matters, someone who makes a difference." "You've always been that person, Eliza. You just needed the world to catch up." 10 years after the fire, Thornfield Academy graduated its 100th student. The ceremony was held in the new Great Hall, built where the old mansion had stood, modern and bright, and designed for purpose rather than grandeur. Eliza, now 43 and every inch the Revolutionary Educator Society called her, gave the commencement address. "When I was your age," she told the assembled graduates, "I believed my choices were simple: marry well and survive, or refuse and be destroyed. I chose destruction. And from those ashes," she gestured to the hall, the school, the hundreds of lives they'd transformed. "We built this." The students listened raptly. They'd all heard the story, but never from her directly. "You're graduating into a world that still doesn't quite know what to do with educated, ambitious women. You'll face resistance, ridicule, people who tell you to be quieter, smaller, more acceptable." Her voice strengthened. "Ignore them. Be loud. Be brilliant. Be impossible to ignore. And when they try to put you in boxes, burn the boxes down and build something better in their place." The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, as parents collected their daughters and graduates celebrated their futures, Adrian found Eliza in the garden. "That was quite a speech," he said. "Too radical?" "Perfect." He pulled her close. "You know, half those girls are going to go out and cause absolute chaos? That's the idea. Society will blame you. Good. I want them to know exactly who to blame when the world they built starts crumbling." She smiled up at him. "We spent 300 years telling women to be quiet. It's going to take more than a decade to undo that damage. But every girl who walks out of here believing she can change the world, that's a crack in the foundation. And eventually, the whole corrupt system comes down, not because we destroyed it in one dramatic moment, but because we built something better alongside it." Something it can't compete with. Adrian kissed her forehead. Have I mentioned lately that you're terrifying? And you love me for it. Desperately. They stood together in the garden as the sun set over Thornfield Academy, watching their students, their legacy, scatter into a world they would help reshape. Eliza thought about the girl she'd been, standing in the ruins of her family's estate, watching a black carriage approach with dread and defiance warring in her chest. If she could go back, would she tell that girl what was coming? The fire and scandal, the fear and fighting, the nights she thought they wouldn't survive? No, because that girl needed to walk through the fire to become this woman. Needed to choose truth over safety, to stand in Parliament and refuse to be silent, to burn everything down and rebuild it better. What are you thinking? Adrian asked. I'm thinking about power, Eliza said. Real power. Not the kind that comes from titles or money or position, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are and refusing to apologize for it. You've always had that. Maybe, but I spent so long being told it was a flaw, something to hide or suppress or apologize for. She turned to face him fully. You gave me permission to unleash it, to be myself without fear. You gave yourself that permission. I just stood beside you while you claimed it. Together, Eliza said, the word that had become their promise, their vow, their truth. Together, Adrian agreed. Behind them, the last light faded from the sky. Ahead, the future stretched out bright and uncertain and full of girls who would carry their revolution forward. Eliza Thornfield, once the desperate daughter of a dying family, once the woman who walked into her own wedding dressed like a maid, once the voice that brought down corrupt lords, stood in the garden of her academy and knew with absolute certainty that every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of terror had been worth it. She'd wanted to matter, wanted to change things, wanted to prove that truth was stronger than lies, that courage could topple corruption, that one woman's refusal to be broken could crack the foundation of an empire built on silence. And she'd done it. Not alone. Never alone. With Adrian beside her, with Catherine's courage, with Sarah's testimony, with Eleanor's ambition, with hundreds of girls who would carry the torch forward. The scandal that had defined them was now a footnote in the larger story of transformation they'd sparked. The fire that had destroyed everything had cleared the ground for something revolutionary to grow, and the woman society had tried to silence had become a voice that echoed across England, teaching generation after generation of girls that they were never meant to be quiet. They were meant to be free. In the years that followed, Thornfield Academy would educate thousands of women, would produce physicians and lawyers, scholars and reformers, artists and scientists, would be copied across England and beyond, a model for what education could be when stripped of artificial limits. Adrian's reforms would reshape government, making corruption harder to hide and accountability impossible to avoid, would establish precedents that protected whistleblowers and empowered victims to seek justice. Together, the Duke and Duchess of Thornfield would become symbols of a new era, where truth mattered more than comfort, where courage was rewarded over compliance, where partnership between equals was possible even in a world designed to prevent it. But none of that mattered as much as this moment, this garden, this man, this choice to keep choosing each other, to keep fighting for a better world, to keep believing that two people willing to burn everything down could build something extraordinary from the ashes. Eliza took Adrian's hand, feeling the calluses from years of work, the strength from years of standing firm. Ready? She asked. For what? For whatever comes next. More fights, more scandals, more people trying to put us back in the boxes we escaped. Adrian's smile was fierce and bright and utterly unafraid. With you? He said. Always. And together they walked back toward the academy, toward the students celebrating their futures, toward the work that was never finished, toward a world they were still in the process of transforming, not as saviors, not as heroes, but as two people who'd looked at an impossible choice and created a third option. Not destruction, not submission, but revolution. One defiant, courageous, absolutely unstoppable choice at a time.